Our first guest in studio, Alisdair Garnett, and he's chairman, Coaching Cycling South Africa. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Yeah, you were just sitting there watching all the chaos.
It was great. Yeah, it's entertaining this early in the morning. So.
It is entertaining. Let's start at the beginning. You were recently appointed as chairman of the Cycling South Africa Coaching Commission. But before we get there, just a bit of background about yourself. As a cyclist.
As a cyclist.
And where are you from?
I started cycling more when I went to university down in Cape Town. And I think I thought it was a better idea to ride my bicycle than study. And got selected for various university teams. And then soon after that, sort of went into a career in IT. So I gave cycling a bit of a miss and came back in the early 2000s. Got back into cycling, won a few SHM titles, went to Worlds, competed in the age category there. And then, came back and sort of been on and off coaching since then while doing other jobs as well.
And before we get to the commission, it's like if you look at cyclists, we know Rensburg now and Louis Meintjes is really doing well.
Yes.
But I don't know any coaches. It feels like a small sport. If you compare the Blue Bulls coach, how many times he's in the newspaper and cricket and the pressure, yes. It's as if for me it was like, oh, they get coaching. I just thought these guys are just fit and
just ride their bicycles.
So
and I think it's a very tough job. Even if you look at rugby, when a team does well in rugby, then the team does well. If a team does badly, then it's the coach's fault. And I think it's less prominent in cycling where coaches sit very much in the background. So they're part of a very big structure where you've got, for example, in the Tour de France, you've got 9 riders and there might be up to 20, 25 support people around there coaching the riders at any given time. So
that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And they're normally with the team as well, the coach?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the whole build-up, they plan out their seasons. They have generally a season plan, a 2, a 3, 5, 10-year plan for that athlete. Yeah. So that they try and keep them in the sport for as long as possible, not just for commercial, but for just for people in general, that they can live a good life. So.
That's great. Okay, now a bit of history about the Cycling SS Coach Commission.
Yes. There's not a whole lot of history from what I can see. So I've been very recently appointed, to say it's literally the last month that I've been appointed. And I spent 2 days with SASCOC last week at a workshop there, which was specifically for a coach development program. So because Cycling South Africa falls underneath SASCOC as a federation, so we affiliated, Cycling South Africa is affiliated to SASCOC. So we need to fall, or the idea is that we fall within their framework for the greater good of sport in general. So not just for cycling, but coaching in general. So it was good to mix with your three top sports in the country. So you've got cricket, soccer, and rugby. They hold representatives there, and interesting to see what they've done in terms of coach development.
So I've seen you said what you want to focus on is establishing a national cycling coach database, and organise regular regional coaching seminars, and educate cyclists. Is that the plans you're working on?
That's pretty much what it comes down to, yeah. And the biggest goal that I'm always trying to stick in the back of my head is that you've got to remember that the athlete, so the cyclist, is the most important part of this whole equation. So to get caught up in politics is not the important part. And that's generally what a lot happens. People get their own agendas, they get caught up in the politics, and they lose sight of what they're actually trying to do for the cyclist. So even as coaches, we've got to look and say it's not about us as coaches, it's about developing athletes, about getting sustainable long-term athlete development programs in place that work for the country. It's looking after the sport as a bigger thing, not just about individuals.
We're going to chat about Tour de France as well, so just stay tuned. Ons gesels verder met Alisdair Garnett. Hy's die voorsitter van Coaching Cycling South Africa. Welcome again, Alisdair.
Thank you. Still good to be here.
You didn't hear now what Arnold said about the Tour de France, but let's just talk a bit cycling, and then we'll get back to South African plans and where we're at with the sport. But for you've got any favourites?
I had favourites. Richie Porte was definitely one of them. He's out for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And from a South African side, had big aspirations and still do for Louis Meintjes. He's second in the young riders competition. and he's starting to really mature as a rider. So I
Sure,
think he's still
8th overall yesterday.
yeah. I think he's 8th or 9th. Yeah, I didn't watch. I got the highlights package yesterday.
Last night.
So, and he's still got a chance. I mean, there's good heel stages coming up, and he's got good opportunities to make up time.
And it's amazing to see, you know, for years we didn't have that. So the same thing. They do a lot of marketing now for cycling because you get excited. And I know Chris Froome, I know he's for Kenya, but even it was at school in Bloemfontein in St Andrews.
Everybody claims ownership of Chris Froome.
Yeah.
So Kenya does, South Africa does,
But I walked my dogs on St Andrews cricket, pitch. So for me, it was like, hey, Chris Froome was here as a child. So I also claim him.
Absolutely.
Do you think he will be strong enough? Because Arnold now said today's would be a very difficult day for him. He's 18 seconds still in front. Do you think he's not the best climber?
He's one of the best climbers in the world.
Okay, so he's good with that.
So he's not just an all rounder, but he's fantastic in what he does. Yeah.
So you think he'll do good today?
I still think he's outright the favourite. Yeah.
That's just amazing. For me, it was the whole thing with Tour de France. The fascinating thing for me is who's the best.
Yes.
When you start that race, at the end of the day, this guy, whatever you do, but I think it's like with Wade as well, if you run against him. That's fascinating, but the technical side of cycling. I think for me, it feels like it needs a bit more marketing to let the public know exactly how it works, because the moment you get it, you're into the sport.
It's a very difficult sport to understand in terms of team tactics. So if you look, and a lot of people, I think, don't grasp the concept of the leader and the general classification and how that works. So you'll finish a stage and they'll say who won the Tour de France and why isn't the one who won that stage the leader. So that takes a bit of explanation. But I think with the TV coverage that we get, and we're fortunate in this country to get such fantastic TV coverage, that people are starting to get up to speed, and cycling as a sport is growing massively. So just gaining huge momentum.
As a child, I remember Arkies Besaidnout. That was the era I grew up in, and we had the report tour.
Yes,
there was South African tour, but we don't really have that anymore.
No, but there's plans.
Is there plans? Because for me, that was the most important question this morning. I promise. I said, for me, it was such a thing as a child
to have the report tour.
To have the report tour. Like we all looked up at it. It was amazing. So there's plans to have a national event like that again.
There's definite plans, and there's a big push to try and get it in the process. I know there's some issues with naming rights in terms of what they can call it.
Yes.
But as Tour de France showcases France, we want something that showcases South Africa.
Yeah, Tour de Mzansi.
Absolutely.
I think that will be a lovely, lovely one.
There was something like that a while back as well. So yeah.
No, I think that will be great. So let's get back to the practical side of a commission like this and how healthy the sport is. For me, again, as an outsider, I tried my hand at triathlon as a student. That's 25 years ago. So, and then I sold my bike for a ticket overseas, never bought one again. But mountain biking for me feels at this stage kind of against road biking. It's everyone wants to mountain bike.
Absolutely.
But we want to get guys on road bikes as well. Or you think there's a balance?
There's still a balance. So there's no. If you look at the amount of entries that you have in events like the Cape Tour,
Epic that's the thing.
And 94.7. So the Telkom 94.7 challenge is coming up. I mean, you've got 35,000 and 25,000 cycling entries, which is huge. It's massive. And those are the two largest mass participation events in the world. So in terms of road biking, there's definitely a huge following. But mountain biking is more interesting. You get to see places in the country that maybe you wouldn't see ordinarily. So they open up, farmers will open up landowners will open up access to their land so that mountain bikers can ride through areas that they wouldn't ordinarily get to see, which is something quite special, I think. So.
And then also one thing that I've seen, and I think it's just because of our country changed the last 20 years, and it changed a lot, is for me, I see there's a lot of black guys that's cycling, full gear into the sport on Sundays. They've got big groups going on even breakfast, meeting up for breakfast afterwards. And it wasn't like that. I mean, that started, I think, last 10 years. If you can correct me if I'm wrong. But for me as well, it shows that there's massive growth as a whole for South Africa. Everyone is joining.
Absolutely, it's a big. As a community, I think everyone's getting into cycling, and not just South Africa, but the whole of Africa. So if you look what happened with Doug Ryder's team with Dimension Data, that they've exposed massive talent throughout Africa, in not just South Africa, but Eritrea and Ethiopia, that you've got big talent there, and they've become celebrities. So our rugby stars and our cricket stars, that the way we treat them here is how Eritreans and Ethiopians will treat their cycling stars.
And that's what I mean by marketing, to get these guys on a wide level of admiration, because like a Louis Meintjes, I mean, if you're just like cycling,
he needs a big PR company to take him.
It's amazing what that guy's doing, you know. And just to motivate some people, these guys can make between £2 to £3 million a year. Yes. So there's even for you, there's in rand wise, that's a 70 mil. That's massive. I mean, it's big money, and I don't think that's the thing. We don't realize that if you go professional like that, you can really make a living out of it.
Definitely, you can make a living, but so the Sagans and the top riders, so the team leaders, and if you take the 20 top teams in the world, you'll get a few riders in each of those teams that are earning massive salaries.
Yes,
and there's a big disparity between what they earn and the domestique, so your regular professionals that sit in the team.
Before we get to the last question, and I want to discuss practical plans even from school level, what you think is needed to just grow this cycling culture. Safety, and I know by law now you have to go with a helmet, and it wasn't like that as well. No. And now with Tour de France, you see when those guys go down, like you mentioned, Porter, I mean, that was a big fall. No. I mean, falling at 75 k's an hour or even 60 k's an hour, and you don't like a biker. You've got your gear.
No.
That's like
it's going to hurt. Yeah.
It's going to hurt. For you, safety in terms of practical, just advice.
It's vital. Yeah, you can't. There's big commitments and obviously regulations in terms of if you organize an event, what you've got to have in place. And anything that you do in safety, it's those first few moments that you need professional care, that you need the best care available for that person. So, and particularly cycling, your risk of head injury is massive. And monitoring that on a basis to make sure that there's no permanent damage is huge. I mean, that's apart from broken bones and road rash and all the abrasions and everything else that goes with it. But I think the head injuries and bleeding on the brain, John Patricius has not made a career out of it, but he's been very vocal, not just in cycling, but most sports, about concussion and the injuries and the long-term effects of that.
And just for everybody somewhere you're going to break your collarbone. That's a given. That is a cyclist.
Yes. We teach you how to fall.
Yeah, we teach you how to fall. Alisdair, we're going to follow up on you, because I'm very curious what your plans is for the future for this big race, but we're out of time.
Okay.
So we didn't get to the practical plans for like schools, but we just want people motivated, watch Tour de France, get into a club and ride your bicycle.
Absolutely.
Thank you for visiting us.
Thank you. Good to be here.